Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Music, Money, and Life podcast. This podcast is brought to you by howtolicenseyourmusic.com. If you are a singer, songwriter, if you play in a band, if you're interested in learning how to make money via music licensing, check out my website, howtolicenseyourmusic.com. I have a whole website devoted to teaching musicians how to make money licensing their music in TV shows, films, video games, ringtones, advertisements, and more. Today I have with me a special guest. I have Aaron Bethune, another Aaron. Aaron Bethune is from Canada. He runs a company called Play It Loud Music, which is a music library catalog based out of Canada. Aaron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm doing really great. I'm down here in the southern states, actually, so a little bit of a different place than I'm used to being at this time of year. A little bit warmer, too, I will say.
Okay, where are you now? Are you still in Texas?
No, I was in Texas last week. I'm now in Georgia, just close to Atlanta, and then I head to Nashville next week. And so making my rounds, and then I head back to Canada at the beginning of May.
Nice. I just recorded a podcast about an hour ago with a musician from Nashville. What are you doing down there?
Well, I've been sort of comically, I guess you could say, calling it my tour of the no agenda. And I think within the music industry, something that is hugely important is creating connections and building relationships. And so there's a lot of people that we meet online and we meet through business without actually meeting in person. And I think it's very important to make the effort when you can to actually go and meet with people. So I've been meeting a lot of people that I've already been working with, people that I have never met before. I've consequently been introduced to new people, and it's been everybody from for example, Tom Jackson, who's well known for being the live producer that he is. I've met with Ariel Hyatt, who is well known for her social media.
Sure.
I've met with who else? There's actually been so many people I've met with. It's been kind of incredible, actually. I've got meetings with all kinds of people next week, including one person that I met on the way out from a meeting by coincidence, and we're going to be talking about things in China. So anyways, it's interesting how things work.
Nice. And are you meeting people with the hopes of parlaying this into is this benefiting Play It Loud, or are you just meeting people just to sort of make new connections in general?
Well, I'd say it's kind of a mixture of everything, because at the end of the day, I am Play It Loud Music as far as the licensing world is concerned, as well as the managing and touring. But I'm also writing my second book. My first one is literally just going to the editors now, and it's a book that's actually about the one that's going to the editors is called Jack of All Trades: The Resource for the Musician Doing It All. And it covers a number of things, so I could talk about that later. But nonetheless, meeting with people and asking questions and finding out about how they've found success in what they do is interesting, because at the end of the day, you can kind of come up with not a formula, but you start to see certain traits that come about from people that are successful. So I'm meeting with people for the purpose of Play It Loud Music and the clients that I represent. I'm meeting with people for the purpose of the book that I'm writing. I'm meeting with people to also interview them, and for my own podcast. And I'm also meeting with people that I just really respect, and I think that there's something really intriguing about how meeting with people can lead to very interesting and sometimes unexpected opportunities.
Wow, it sounds like you're a really busy guy.
Yes, I am, and I think that what's the saying? Give a busy person work. It seems that the busier it gets.
Yeah, and in terms of Play It Loud, do you have other people that work with you as well up in Canada?
Yes, I do. In fact, one of the people is one of the people that works for me is actually my brother. So
Yeah.
I've been kind of debating whether to sort of really promote that fact, because it seems like when you watch things on TV, and there seems to be a little bit of a popularity trend going on right now with different businesses and shows and all kinds of things that involve brothers. So I've been kind of tempted to sort of really come out and make that statement. But you know, I've actually played in a band with my brother too, and there's something about you know, knowing the people you work with and thinking along the same wavelength, that sometimes, you know, family ties are really the only way.
Nice. Well, listen, Aaron. For those of you listening, a lot of you probably know Aaron from the interview that I did with Aaron last year. I had Aaron on for my site, how to license your music.com, and during that conversation, Aaron and I focused primarily on licensing. But today we're gonna go a little broader, and we're gonna talk about some topics that just in general I think will be beneficial to musicians. And so one of the topics we were going to talk about, Aaron, is the you know, what traits successful musicians have in common. And you work with a lot of musicians via Play It Loud, and you do a lot of networking, and you've just written this book about this topic. So let's talk a little bit about what traits do musicians need to have to be successful in what is a very competitive industry.
Sure. Well, I think there's something that makes sense to do first, and that's to, on the one hand, consider what is success, because it really is, you know, it's all about perspective, and I think sometimes it really means, you know, life fulfillment. However, something that makes sense when trying to think about success is looking at success in different ways and applying it to different things. So, for example, if we, you know, consider looking at success as getting a college degree, or learning a new language, or, you know, making physical changes to your body through going to the gym, even learning to walk as a child or learning to talk. The fact is that there's some very set steps that are taken to achieve that type of success. So, for example, if we talk about a college degree, you know that if you want to get that college degree, you're going to have to take all the courses. It's going to, you know, 4 or 5 years, maybe more. You know, you're going to have to pass the exams, and so there's this very set list of things that you have to accomplish in order to reach your goal. So, I think when you look at it from that perspective, as you go along, when you're in first year at college, you know how much further you've got to go till you reach your degree. And also, perhaps to some degree more importantly, the people around you, i.e. being friends and family, also know how far you've got to go to reach that success. So, for example, you know, if your parents know you're in your 4th year, you're in your last semester, and you've got one last semester to go, it's likely that they're going to be very encouraging of you. They're going to be very supportive. Some parents might be even offering gifts of who knows what at the end of it. Some people, who knows, get cars and travel around the world. I don't know. But the point is that it's an overall clear picture of what steps it takes to reach that goal. And so having that support and people saying, you're almost there, you can do it, or you look so great, you know, the gym's really paying off, stick with it. You know, the fact that, you know, I've got a 3-year-old son, and I remember when he was learning to walk, you know, part of me was thinking, I can't believe he's going to walk, but I know he will. And you talk to other people and you find out when their kids started to walk or when their kids started to talk, and you have this idea of the end in sight. And so when it comes to music, it's really no different. I mean, for example, you know, to digress for 1 second, if you take a language, I lived in Spain for 14 years and I moved there when I was 12. And I remember sitting in a classroom and everyone was talking this foreign language, and it literally sounded like gibberish. and then there'd be like a laugh, or there'd be a clap, or there'd be something. Absolutely make no sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took roughly 6 months to start understanding what things meant. I used to like playing basketball, and we'd play in the playground, and then people would say, mañana jugamos, and I'd be like, what the hell does that mean? But I found out that mañana means the morning. It also means tomorrow. And over trial and error and showing up at the basketball court early, you start to associate what things mean and how it all works. And so basically after about 6 months, I was actually understanding the language. And after a year, I was speaking it. And then the second year, I basically became fluent. And the point is that people, set out to learn languages, and they'll get part way and they'll get fed up, and some people will change languages as though that something else is going to be easier. So
yeah, and by the way, Aaron, just so you know, I speak Spanish fluently as well.
Well, there you go. So we should.
If you want, we can do this podcast. Podemos hablar en español si tú quieres. No hay problema conmigo.
Pues ya ves, veo que eres fluente
No,
en el idioma.
We got to go back to English.
Yeah.
Nope. No, but I totally relate to what you're saying.
Yeah. So I mean, so basically, the types of things that allow for people to reach that degree, to meet their fitness goals, to learn a language, there's a lot of things that are involved in that, which is things like persistency and consistency. But you have to be doing it for an authentic reason. I mean, someone that is forced to learn German is never going to become fluent in the language because they couldn't care less. They're being forced to do that. If you're going into, let's just say, music, and it's something that you're not doing authentically, it's not something that you're getting involved in because it's truly your passion. I mean, you hear people say all the time, if you could imagine doing anything else, then you shouldn't be in the business. Well, it's true because, you have to do it authentically because you're going to need a crap load of persistency and drive, and you're going to have to be consistent in what you do, just like you would be if you went to the gym. And in fact, what I recommend people and I challenge people to do is I say, look, if you want to have an idea of how you're doing as far as that, being consistent is concerned, and persistent, etc., I say set yourself a fitness goal. Tell yourself you're going to go for a run every morning, or tell yourself you're going to hit the gym up 3 times a week, or whatever your interest might be, yoga, it doesn't matter. Set yourself that goal, and if you're going to start lagging on it, you're going to start to, well, I don't think I have time for the run this morning, I don't think I have time for the gym today, I don't think I have time to go to that yoga class, then I can guarantee you're doing exactly the same thing with your career. So from that perspective, it's a good idea to give yourself a way of judging your progress. So if we look at the career of musicians in particular, I think you have to take those things that you do in the other subjects, but to a higher degree. Musicians that are successful have a higher drive than your average person. They are extremely passionate about what they do.
Sure. But let me just jump in for a second. Do you think part of it is a problem of not having really clearly defined goals? I mean, what I've always said is, music is one of these things where it's a little, to quote unquote make it, and I guess we can sort of talk about what that even means, but it's sort of an ambiguous path to a certain extent, it seems like. For example, if you want to become a doctor, if you're ambitious enough and you have the money, you go to medical school and you complete your training, and at the end, if you study hard enough, you're going to become a doctor, like with 100% certainty. Whereas in music, it's one of these careers where, how do you make it? Well, you play a lot of shows, you try to build a following. I guess what I'm getting at is it seems like it's a little harder to sort of know exactly what path to go down. How does that kind of factor in?
Well, I agree with you. And I think that the added aspect of that, I mean, you're talking about from the perspective of the musician. Now, if you take that outside to the environment in which the musician is surrounded, the people that surround them, it just amplifies that, because all of a sudden you have parents. I mean, I'm not saying this happens in every single culture and every single family, but, there's a lot of this whole get a real job thing. And so when the people around you also have no clue as to what it's going to take or how close you are to the finish line, so to speak, you find that a lot of these sort of friends and families, that should be kind of your support group, just as they might be in college or whatever, are also the people that are starting to celebrate your failures more than your successes, because in their minds, it's not a sure thing. And so it's better to get you on track for a sure thing, which everyone knows what the goals are and how to reach them. And so there's, which again brings the fact that, a musician really does need to have more drive than the average person, et cetera, et cetera. However, what you're saying, yes, I mean, there is especially now in the music industry, I think there's something to be said for the fact that it's kind of wide open as to how you go about building a career. You don't have to stick to a format that used to exist. I mean, now people that are creative, people that are different, are going to stand out more so than people that follow the rules or the norm. I mean, as a little example on the side, if you're driving, the first day you drive, you really pay attention to the movements you make in order to change gears and make sure you're staying within the lines and that kind of thing. And after a while, you've done it so many times that your unconscious takes over, which is what allows you to be singing or to be talking to somebody else or whatever it might be. However, when something unexpected, something out of the normal, something that's a novelty, something that is a surprise, like something that runs across the road, or something that all of a sudden brings you back to your conscious mind, then you pay attention. And so I think that as a side note, that if your career is based on what is everyone else doing, how can I do the same? If this person did this and I do the same, I'll reach the same level of success. Doesn't work, because you need to be that person that's the thing that runs across the road, or the something that that is a surprise or unexpected, so that I mean, people are so used to patterns and things that are that they expect, that it puts them into this kind of element of not really paying attention. So you have to create your own ways, and that just adds to the complications or the confusion or the difficulty of understanding how to have these sort of milestones in a career to judge yourself by, whether you're in first year, or if you're in third year, if you're about to graduate. And so I something else that I truly believe is that we're given opportunities all the time. It's not something that you get this one opportunity and you didn't take it, so you blew it, or you took it and you found success and somehow that evolved into overnight success. I think what happens is we have opportunities come to us all the time. However, as just a sort of to try and look at it from a different perspective, if every single day was a sunny day, we wouldn't really recognize it as being a good day unless we'd experienced a storm, or experienced a rainy day or a gray day, or something that wasn't sunny. So what happens is in our careers and as musicians is that we, through experience and through experience building knowledge and developing our talent, we get to the point where we can recognize an opportunity. Because the truth is, if you don't know you're getting an opportunity, how would you ever take it? And the other thing is that you have to develop your talent. I mean, you have to be able to get to the point where what you do is ready to go. Not that there's potential, but you have to develop your talent. Record labels aren't involved in artist development anymore, at least not in the way they used to be. So you have to do that yourself. And the fact is that through trial and error, which could mean breaking up in bands, making a crap load of mistakes, recording songs that will never make it on the radio, whatever it might be, you have to go through these processes, this process of being able to build your knowledge and your experience so that when the right opportunity comes, you're able to take it. And to add to that, just as a sort of an observation, something that I find interesting is there's this element of value. There's something about, if that support system around you doesn't value what you do. So in other words, they're not saying, hey, you're so close. You're so close. We support you in what you're doing. We know this is a struggle. We know you can do it. If there isn't this kind of support that you would get if you were, your mom comes out to watch you play soccer or something, or you're in that last semester of college and you're going to get that degree. If there isn't that support, it seems to me that it's almost like musicians, and I hate to say this, and of course I'm sort of blanketing everyone by saying this, but it seems like there's this element of low self-worth, and by that I mean here's the classic example. You go and watch a band play, and they get off stage. You go over and you say, "Man, that was an awesome show. You guys were great. Oh, I really screwed up my one part. I just know I could have played better. It's no sort of thanks so much. Wow, that's awesome." It's more like, this lack of self-belief, this lack of value, and so I tell musicians, I say, okay, well, if you're going to do that, or even worse, when people ask you what do you like or what's your band like, you some people even say, well, we're not that great. If you're going to do that, then how are you ever going to accept success when it comes to you? How are you ever going to value yourself to the point where you can when it comes to, say, putting a price on yourself, how are you ever going to get the true value? I mean, if you were if success is making $1 million a year, just work out what you have to make per day to make $1 million in 365 days. So to do that, you have to give yourself some amount of value for what you're doing. And if you can't give the value to what you do yourself, nobody else will.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's an interesting observation. Sorry to cut you off. It sounds like you've been talking to me after some of my shows recently. But, I think this is something I've thought a lot about in terms of musicians. I think maybe one of the reasons what you're talking about exists, this idea that musicians are so overly critical is, and I think this is another thing that just plays into the difficulty of turning music into a business, is that musicians are really critical of themselves. I mean, I know I'm super critical of my own music, and I think it's because music is this thing. It's a little different than like a traditional business, right? Like, for example, in my own life, I have my website, and that's my business. That's sort of my 9 to 5. And I'm a lot more objective about that. If I put out a product or I put out a course and it doesn't sell well, I don't interpret that as a reflection of my own self-worth. But if I write a song or play a show and it's not received well, it's much harder to be objective about that, So I think musicians do, because they invest so much of themselves, they care a little more deeply, and maybe because of that, they're more critical than they should be.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're really putting yourself out there. You're putting yourself out there for judgment, and I mean that's why when you look at people that are successful, you find that they are, I kind of call it authentically confident. So they're confident about being themselves. There are also people that value what they do. There are also people that have this amazing drive. I mean, what you're saying, this happens to people all the time. It's like sending your music for a spot in a TV show and getting it rejected, or sending it to radio and getting it rejected, or entering it in some competition and not making it. Like all these kind of things, it's this constant rejection, and a lot of that starts with that sort of feeling of, I mean, in the extreme cases, people that start out expecting for that failure, and I think that there's this element of if you're looking at success as a thermometer, there's this aspect of, it's like we have this internal thermometer that's set. Now, whether that's because whether the temperature it's set at is based on the amount of support we had from our parents growing up to perform in front of their friends, or whether it was based on the fact of what people would say, or that radio would pick up songs, whatever it might be. There's this element that, I think we're kind of born with, which is a temperature that is our comfort zone. It's where we feel good.
Mm-hmm.
When that temperature drops, we'll do anything, whatever it takes, to bring it back up to that same temperature. But when it goes high, we don't feel comfortable either. So we do whatever it takes to bring it back down.
Mm-hmm.
And that can mean sabotaging success. So for example, I'm sure people listening to this will have either gone through the situation or had their friends tell them about it, but they'll say something. You'll hear someone say something like, "I can't believe I'm with this chick. She's so above me. Like I just can't believe I'm with this person. She's in a different league," or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough,
then they break up.
They break up.
Later.
And
Yep.
why is that? Well, it's because they're not comfortable, vibrating at that level, so to speak. It's the same thing. You look at people that win lotteries, and the money's gone in a year. There's these elements of, you like to get back to what feels comfortable. It happens with exercise too. There's people that will do all kinds of crazy exercises, but when they get to their new shape or they get to their new level of fitness, it's not really something that they're used to. And not only are they not used to it, but they also aren't doing it with the intention to set the bar at that height. The bar is still, or the temperature is still set at that lower degree. And so, that there's this element of needing to reset that thermometer of success. But I think that the other, that does still tie in with self-value, because it's kind of like saying, and I have a story I can tell you about, but there's this element of when success stares you in the face, or you are about to make a dream come true, it still comes down to that self-value of being able to say, yeah, I'm worth this. I deserve to reach this goal. I deserve this level of success.
How can you cultivate that? How can musicians, how can you cultivate that sense of self-value? Is it just experience, just doing it?
Well, I think it does come back to the element of experience and knowledge and developing talent. The fact is that, there's not many people that thrown on a stage without any kind of practice whatsoever feels comfortable.
Sure.
There are some, but it's like that 10,000 hours rule. No matter what, if you do something enough times, then essentially, it becomes second nature. So in the process of developing talent, you need to be able to develop your ability to value yourself for what you're worth. So for example, listening to this conversation and hearing that someone's saying, "Oh, we could have done so much better," instead of simply saying thank you and accepting that you're playing for the audience and the audience has just validated what you've done, is part of that learning experience. The idea is, Don't do it again. Rats don't do things twice. Yep. So don't do it again, and incorporate that into that development of your talent. And as you do it, you start to see opportunities, because the thing is that you get so caught up in worrying about perfection. Here's an example. I've played guitar for 24 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I've played live, I'd go, "Oh, crap, that wasn't the note I wanted to play." So that's too easy to go, "I screwed up." But it's only because it's the note that I didn't intend to play. The audience doesn't know that. In fact, it's the notes that come away, once again going back to the unexpected, that sparks people's interest to pay attention, that will quite often afterwards, when you think you screwed up the worst, that people come up and say, "Wow, that was such a great solo, that was such a cool guitar part." And the fact of the matter is that it's we get too caught up in ourselves, and you need to listen to your audience. And so, again, building the experience and building your knowledge through trial and error gets you into a position where when opportunity comes, you can take it. Because let's just say the person that told you how great you were was someone that could make a difference in your career. Well, I can tell you that from looking at people that are successful and learning what it takes to be successful, it's almost like you can have this list that you can check off. And if the person has, you can deal with potential, but they still have to have these things that are on that list that you check off to feel that they're worth investing time in. And so if you deal with a musician who's obviously got no, self-worth, I mean, that's going to just be added to the amount of work you have to do to get them ready for them to even accept success. And I know it sounds kind of absurd, the idea that, accepting success or the fear of a dream coming true, but it really is a reality. And I think that, it takes someone saying this kind of thing to become aware of it and then to be able to make change.
It almost seems to me like your attitude and your confidence is more important than talent. I mean, we all know people who are super talented that for whatever reason just haven't figured out how to make it in the music business. And then there's other people with, modest levels of talent that go really, really far.
I would agree. I think that is completely true. And the fact is that there's a lot of bedroom talent. I mean, just put YouTube on and watch some 6-year-old play, some video game, Nintendo music or something that's just kind of mind-boggling. But, it's you got to have these different qualities to come together, and you have to be confident because there's so. I took a degree in music, and I remember, let's put it this way. Everyone that came out of that degree technically had the same credentials as far as the education system was concerned. So my degree was in performance. And so when we came out of that, you would think that we should technically all be able to go to set up our concerts and all charge the same amount. I mean, there'd be this element of, qualification-wise, we'd all be the same. But you have half the people that go out there and rock the stage, and you have half the other people that don't even get up on stage because the people that rock the stage are so much better than them, and they're not good enough, and they're not quite there. And at the end of the day, it's like, my wife is an artist, and people pay for her art, and whatever amount of time that took to make, whether it was 5 minutes or whether it was 5 hours or 5 years, is ultimately people have to. It's what it's worth to them. So, for example, you can't tell yourself that because someone else is able to play 5 times as fast as you means that to the person who's going to come out and pay for the experience is going to have to pay per note. You're an artist, so you do what you're good at. And the best thing you can do is be yourself. Because if you try to be the person that plays 1 million notes per second and that's not you, well, let me tell you, one note with a lot of meaning and feeling, and you know this, says so much more than 1 million notes. But for the idea that someone who plays that one note that has just gives you the, the hair on the back of your neck stand on end.
Mm-hmm.
To the audience, that's what it's all about. And I think that, it's too often that people get into this comparison game. And I just, you have to, at some point in time, you have to accept that you are who you are, and that, let's put it this way: if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will.
Yeah, no, this is great. I'm inspired just listening to this, because I think what you're saying is totally true. I think I'm guilty of sort of overanalyzing things, and maybe I'm a little too overeducated. I think with some musicians you can take so many lessons and study music so much that somewhere along the way you sort of forget about the fact that at the end of the day, most music listeners don't really care about technique and theory. They care about what they like. They care about what resonates with them. And obviously some, I'm all for writing and crafting really well done music, but your average music listener doesn't know music, the way musicians do. So I think that's another part of this. Well,
take this example. There's a really great book out there called Effortless Mastery, and it's by Kenny Werner, who you probably know is a jazz pianist.
Yeah, I've read this book.
Okay, so his book I mean, one of the examples he gives, and correct me if I'm wrong, is he talks about playing to the audience in, I think it's, he's playing in the key of A, and he takes a solo in A flat. Now, technically, as you know, educated musicians that are into theory would know that being a note, a semitone away, is going to be really rubbing, and consequently creating dissonance. So in other words, to take a solo in A flat over the key of A could create jarring sounds. However, when he performs this to the audience, he does it in such a way that he truly believes that what he is doing is beautiful. So one of his exercises, I think, was, sit down, close your eyes, play one note on the piano, listen to it for like 20 minutes, and really focus on how beautiful it is. Now, his whole purpose of believing in the beauty of what he was doing is that by believing in what you do as being something that is truly beautiful, the audience does too. I mean, for example, it's like, again, it comes back to that believing in yourself is going to be what makes other people believe in you too. I've spoken to investors, and I've asked them, well, what is it that you do? What is it that you look for to invest your money? And half the time, it's the person they're investing in.
Sure.
So if you had, I mean, it's like, it's not a very good example, but if you had a really great joke and you delivered it the wrong way because you weren't too sure if someone was going to think it was funny, I can assure you it's not going to be funny. But if you say something that's going to be, is going to make people laugh, the delivery is going to make someone laugh. And it's just, again, it's that idea that you have to believe in yourself in order for other people to do that, and it truly does affect things. It's not just kind of like, oh, I can do it, I'm so great, people are going to love me. It actually takes over and creates something that's beautiful, and it allows you to be yourself. Because I think, I mean, let's put it this way: if you go in and you look at a painting, you think of Picasso, you might buy it because it reminds you of Picasso, and you don't have the money to buy an original, but you're never going to be Picasso. And it's a lot safer to try and copy someone else's success. But if you really want to stand apart, and you just, I mean, you can start listing all the musicians throughout time that stand out. And they stand out because they're themselves, not because they sound like somebody else.
Sure. And there's a lot of, great, very well-known, legendary musicians who maybe don't necessarily have, I mean, with singers, for example, one of my big hangups is singing. And I write my own songs. I have for years now, and I've licensed my own songs that I've sung on. But it's been this obstacle where I've never been real comfortable out front in that role. Mm-hmm. I just got hired doing 2 shows a week here locally, solo, all my own stuff, singing and playing guitar. I'm super nervous just thinking about it. But what I keep coming back to is there's all these musicians with non-traditional, not traditionally great voices, but they have their own distinct voice, and they've made it. I mean, Bob Dylan comes to mind. Neil Young is another one. I mean, there's
Bob Dylan,
a lot.
Neil Young, Leonard Cohen, what's his name? Tom Waits, Axl Rose. I mean, pretty much every singer that has become a household name with a specific name is household name with a specific sounding voice become legendary.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm super excited. It's exactly, I feel like, the challenge I need for my own music, but it is an obstacle. But I think it's like, I'm super comfortable playing guitar just because it's something I've done for so many years, and I think it's the same process of just I think experience really factors into building confidence, and maybe for some musicians more than others. Maybe some musicians just have more of a natural sense of confidence, and other people have to develop it over time.
I think so, and I think that the other aspect of that is that again, it kind of comes from whether you've been encouraged to get back to your homework, or to take something else up, or if on the other side of things you've been encouraged to perform in front of friends and family and cheered on. I mean, those things play into it, but I mean, there's no doubt in anyone's mind that if you do something 10,000 times, it happens naturally. So if there's anything that doesn't come naturally, if you do it enough times, it ends up being something that becomes second nature. I mean, Jimi Hendrix used to put the lights off in the studio because he didn't like his own voice.
Yeah, or
So,
Jim Morrison turning his back to the crowd, right?
Absolutely. So I mean, there's so many cases of just that. I mean, just because someone's hit stardom doesn't mean they don't go through the same things as other people do. And I mean, I think another aspect of all of this is visualization. And I mean, Kenny Werner's book does talk about that. Just the idea of, I mean, here's a really great example, and I apply this and I tell this to people all the time. For example, way back when I used to teach guitar lessons, I used to show a student whatever it was that I was showing them, and the second that they played it right, I would stop them immediately and I say, "Did you feel that? Did you feel how that felt? Because you just played it perfectly, and that is what it feels like to play it perfectly." And so then I would say, now that you know what it feels like, try and repeat the feeling. And, and you look at all these great musicians, they're not looking at their fingers to see what they're doing. They're singers aren't sort of singing with their eyes wide open trying to figure out what they're doing. People are in the zone, as they say, because it becomes feeling. And so I tell people that if this crosses borders, it's not just music. If you had a great show, then really focus on what the feeling was that you had when you played that show, and then really focus on it, almost meditate on it before you play your next show, because you're going to put yourself into that sort of feeling of whatever it was, playing perfectly, or like I said, it doesn't have to just be music. It could have been that you in business, you went into a meeting and you just nailed it, and the consequence was you made a deal. Knowing what you felt like, what your energy was when you were in that room, to recreate it. When you went to the gym and you had a great workout, recreating that feeling. It's that idea of the brain uses the same areas in real experience and imagined experience. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So when we imagine things, we are actually using the same neurological functions as we do when we actually do them. So it truly is like mental rehearsal. I mean, athletes do this. You rehearse the way you want to feel in the future, so that, again, it's like rehearsing any other thing you do. I mean, if you rehearse your scales a gazillion times, then somehow the sound of those scales are going to make it into your music when you're not thinking about it. So if you can rehearse the way you want to feel when you perform, or you rehearse the way you want to feel when you go into doing business, or how you feel about yourself, the way you want to feel about yourself, you can mentally rehearse it, because you actually are using the same parts of your brain as you do when you actually do it. And so it's a fascinating thought, the power of the mind.
So you're suggesting musicians, and I think the book Effortless Mastery that you referenced talks about this too, but you're suggesting musicians actually take time each day or several times a week and sit down and actually sort of meditate and visualize how they want a performance to go. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And I think the more you do it, the better. I'll give you an example. My father's in the world of fine arts and antiques, and in the world of art, as we all know, it's also it can have an estimated value, but it's also in the eye of the beholder, or it's better said, it's what someone is willing to pay for it that's ultimately going to be paid. Whether you accept what they want to offer you or not is a different matter. But the fact is that, again, it's not like you've got X units of something. When you sold them all, you've made X amount of dollars. So I use my dad as an example because I've seen this firsthand, and it's fascinating my whole life, because he would say, this weekend I need to sell X amount of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And he would, again, these are items that you can't say, well, I need to sell 10 of these. It's
Mm-hmm.
you can't guess exactly, how much you're going to make. But the thing is that he would do this. He would do it. He would do it to the point that when the weekend was over, he would have reached his goal exactly. It might have been 1,000 up or down, but the types of things he was saying is, well, this weekend, I need to sell 30,000. I need to sell 90,000.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, well, right. I mean, yeah, I'd like to do that too. And he'd be there, and by the end of the weekend, he'd have done 31,000, 29,000, 30,000. And so I couldn't get it. And then one day he went to the bathroom and he dropped his wallet, and he made $8,000 that day. This was part of his I've got to make so much by the end of the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And he dropped his wallet in the bathroom, and it had all the checks he'd been given plus $4,000 in cash. So this again, I'm going to relate this back to the music business. The fact is that's an 8,000. Now all of a sudden that you had, but you don't have anymore. And I mean, as far as, mindset's concerned, I mean, that would be enough to bring any normal person down. But his approach was, I'm not going to give it any more energy. I just hope they need the money. I hope that the person that got it is going to be able to really put it to a good use. By the end of the weekend, he'd reached his goal. So, I couldn't understand this. So I said, well, what do you do? And he said, I just visualize the money going from their pocket to my pocket. And I truly believe when I tell myself what I'm going to do, that it's going to happen.
This sounds almost a little bit like the law of attraction, secret type thinking.
It is, but you know what? I've given a lot of thought to the whole of law of attraction. I mean, there's a ton to be said, and this totally does tie into that. Again, I mean, part of what I would have said, with that regarding the music industry is it's all too easy to get into the habit of predicting that you're going to fail, or that you're not going to play well, or you're not going to get the deal that you wanted. But you can't go that way. You can't put that kind of energy into what you do. You have to really tell yourself that you are going to accomplish the goals you set. But as far as the law of attraction is concerned, and things are meant to be, I've given a lot of thought, and it kind of comes back to what we were talking about a bit earlier regarding, developing your talent and experience and knowledge. The fact of the matter is that because of our experience and because of our knowledge and because of our talent, we are put in front of an opportunity that we can finally recognize that prior to that moment we hadn't been able to recognize because we just didn't know it was an opportunity.
Sure.
So if we are in that moment and we have that ability to recognize it, then you could say that it was meant to be. I mean, in the case of my dad, I've watched what he does, and I've made a lot of notes because he's in my biased mind is one of the world's best salesmen, and so I've taken a lot of notes as to what it is that he does and how he goes about building trust in his clients. And I mean, because no matter what, people have to feel. I mean, let's put it this way, and this goes into the world of branding, which really fascinates me, especially when it's connected to neuroscience. But in branding, if you think about it, with the idea that we used to at one point exchange gold to now that we'll accept PayPal, is based 100% on our trust in the company and the trust in the brand. And so, watching my dad and how he interacts with the clients and how he, ends up making the amounts of money that he tells me beforehand that he's going to do is, it still comes back to that knowledge and that experience. I mean, here's an example. Someone will come and they'll look at something and they'll have a $5,000 handbag, they'll have $2,000 pairs of shoes, a $50,000 ring. Basically they're not doing too badly as far as financially is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll ask, "Oh, how much is this?" And then he'll tell them how much it is. And then they'll say, "Oh, we'll pay," and they'll say maybe half the price.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll sometimes say, "I'm sorry, but you obviously can't afford it." Now, through experience, we are beings that really give value to our social status. There's all kinds of experiments that have been done to show that we need to be in communities. We don't live as long if we live by ourselves. And so It's very important, our social interaction. So imagine you're in some store and you have no lack of money and you're with your friends and you ask a price on something and they tell you that it's this much, and then when you offer them half the price, they tell you, I'm so sorry, you can't afford it.
Right.
The reaction is, oh, well, of course I can afford it.
Yeah, wait a minute. Let me counter offer. So it's almost it's a sales tactic, right? To kind of convince them that maybe they can afford it.
Exactly, and I think the thing is that, I do believe in the law of attraction, I really do, but I think that if you start to try and find some sort of an explanation for things, it doesn't change the fact that the more knowledge and experience you have, I mean, I don't know if you've, I can't remember which book it was, I think it was Blink, yeah, Blink.
Malcolm Gladwell.
Malcolm Gladwell. He talks about this in thin slicing of the brain and how we have the ability to use what we feel as being our gut feeling over something, and really, it's the fact that we've done enough of whatever it might be that's going to allow us to have a judgment, to be able to make that split second judgment, and so we technically are able to. We are able to allow ourselves to have better, quick judgment, or have more gut feelings and go with them. And the fact is that if you do go with a gut feeling, it's actually because your gut is accessing, your gut is accessing all that prior knowledge and experience that gives you that ability to make that split second decision. So with this, I guess what I'm sort of trying to say is that I think that, when it comes to success, when it comes to, all this that we've been talking about, there has to be this time period in which you do your 10,000 hours, that you build your experience through trial and error, and that this knowledge, is gained so that when that opportunity comes, you're able to take it, and that you value yourself enough to realize that when the opportunity stares you in the face, you don't cower in its shadow.
Yeah, you have to act. No, I love the idea of the law of attraction, and I think having goals and writing them down, I think it's super important. I think that it's sort of an esoteric concept, and it's a little slippery, right? But absolutely, you have to be positive. I mean, that sort of goes back to what we've been talking about most of this conversation. You have to be confident. You have to be positive. So I love I've noticed this in my own life where when I tend to write goals down and really sort of obsess over them, I tend to realize them more frequently. It's not like 100% thing. And I think this is where some people sort of don't buy into the concept, but I totally believe, it just makes sense to me. If you're more focused on something and you're more kind of obsessing over a goal in a good way, in a way that kind of psychs you up, like, of course you're going to be more likely to achieve it.
Well, I kind of came to this not really scary truth, but I started to realize from everyone that I'd spoken to and observed and personal experience that literally everybody that does stick with what they do, that do it passionately, that they do it authentically, that they're driven to do it, that, just because of one failure they don't decide to quit. Every single person has reached their goals. And, again, anyone that sticks with college and studies can get the degree. There's no magic involved. It's just don't give up halfway, because you're not going to get given a degree that you haven't completed. And with that in mind, it's kind of like, I'd almost tell musicians that make sure you're doing what you're doing for the right reasons, that it's authentic and that you're passionate about it. But, stick with it and make sure that you're constantly learning and improving. But the reality is if you set yourself a goal and, like you're saying, obsess over reaching it, it really does happen. And I watched my son when he was, I think he was 2. He might have been 1.5. I think he was 2. And it was a family get together. And there was these little like containers of paint. They weren't the tubes, but they were these small sort of cylindrical containers. And he started stacking them up on the table. and he'd put one up, and then he'd just pick the next one up and just put it on top of the next one and put it on top of the next one. And he'd get it to the point that on the fifth container, it would always fall. And he'd laugh, and that would be half the excitement. But to get, he'd always get it to the fifth one. And we're talking like a 1.5 or 2 year old moving, picking up these paint cylinders, stacking them on top of each other, and every single time getting to the fifth one. Well, now, my wife's uncle, who was in his 50s, came to the table, and sort of to entertain my son, started doing it with him. If he was lucky, he'd get to the third one, and what would happen is he'd put one down, and then he'd slowly place the next one down, and to make sure it wouldn't fall, and then it would fall. And so, this perhaps contradicts what I was saying, but it's almost like the life experience of knowing that something could fall was debilitating his movements, whereas my son, who never even gave it two thoughts as to whether he would successfully stack 5 cylinders or not.
Yeah, no, I think it totally confirms what you're saying. It's just that it works in both directions, right? So
it does.
You can have negative experiences that train you into thinking one way, but you can also cultivate and seek out. It's like with performing, back to the 10,000 hour rule. Which what is that? Outliers. There's another Malcolm Gladwell book that I think that came from, right? He
has written a book called Outliers. I'm not sure if that's in it, but I've heard that for a long time.
But either way, the idea is that you have to do something. It takes time to develop confidence.
Absolutely.
So, well, listen, I know we were going to talk about social media, but we've gone almost an hour, and I forgot this when we talked about this initially, that I have another guest lined up, and we are going to focus strictly on social media in Twitter and Facebook. So I think this is probably a good place to stop, Aaron. This has been a great conversation, a little more perhaps esoteric and maybe a little less, not a lot of real specific advice, but I think what you're saying is totally true. I mean, I've seen it in terms of other musicians that I've seen gone on to great success, and other musicians that haven't, right? Like you have to really, really believe in what you're doing.
No, I think so, and I would hope that people would find a certain amount of advice in it from the aspect of, sometimes you just have to, perspective is everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes hearing something in a different way for it to make sense. And the truth of the matter is that, I do think that through experience of your own and other people's, it's focusing on the positive things and focusing on what it is that actually makes you reach those successes. And it certainly isn't focusing on failure, and it certainly isn't focusing on lack of self-worth. It's really emphasizing the fact that if you do something authentically, if you're passionate about what you do, if you maintain a drive that cannot be broken, if you're consistent in everything you do, over time things will happen. You just have to be open to them, because otherwise opportunities come and go and you don't even know it.
Yep, that makes complete sense to me, Aaron. Listen, if people want to find out more about you and your company, Play It Loud, your website is
Play It Loud. They can go to www.playitloudmusic.com. I would encourage people to go to the blog. There's lots of interviews there as well, and podcasts similar to this. And I call it Above the Noise. So I sort of have this separate business, you could say, called Above the Noise, and it's all about what it takes to be heard above the noise. So these interviews that I do are also just to sort of, I've interviewed all kinds of people, from scientists to branding expert, marketing gurus, you name it, not even within the music industry, but to try and get a broad image of things. The other thing people can do is sign up for the newsletter, which is both accessible through the blog and the website, and I will be. I'm trying to finalize the, I guess you could say, the marketing strategy, but I'm certainly gearing myself towards giving away my first book, at least the PDF version. And,
okay, cool.
The book talks about a lot of what we've been talking about, but it also talks about branding and social media and touring and PR, and I think these are all aspects of these moving parts to a career in music. And one little piece of advice I will give people, and something to sort of chew on,
Sure.
is just like you, I get a lot of music sent to me, and one thing that people don't spend enough time on is not only making their music sound good, but making themselves sound good in words. Because I think a lot of the times people don't realize that the music they send, especially digitally, unless it's experienced through live performance or radio or whatever, it plays absolutely no part whatsoever in the first impression.
Yeah.
And so people should be spending a lot more time on developing.
Do you mean in terms of like the initial email they sent to you?
Yeah, we could probably do another podcast just on the topic of branding and storytelling. But the fact is that if you don't have something that's it's like that thing we were just talking about with the idea of difference and creating that element of the unexpected. You'd be surprised. I mean, well, you wouldn't be surprised. You know what it's like. How many people write the same thing and expect that what they've written is going to lead you to having any interest whatsoever in listening to their music, when if you were just to write it in a compelling way that was, almost more of a story, and I'm not saying Once Upon a Time, but something that sets you apart, not only will it drive people to want to hear your music, but additionally, by the time the person, and in my case me, gets to your music, I actually have now started to build an emotional tie to the music I'm going to listen to, because you sort of prepped me for that. And, it's, again, people all too often totally forget that their music is not playing any part whatsoever in the first impression.
Okay, no, that's an excellent tip. And not to put you on the spot, are we still we had talked about doing a course together. Do you still want to, are you still game for doing that?
Oh,
okay.
I totally do.
Because that might be something we can get into in the context of our course, get into some really specific, ways that writers can get in touch with people like you.
Sure. Well, to be honest with you, Aaron, I would, in regards to a course, I would actually almost rather focus on the branding and the storytelling and how to make the use of the licensing that you get more than how to, say, set up a publishing company, or because I truly, the book that I'm writing, the first thing we talk about is how to recognize your superfan, how to find your superfans. And all too often people don't realize that, you have to follow through with things to, and learn more about your fans to be able to make sure everything you do is targeting them right. So I'd love to talk about branding and
whatever you want to do a course on, let me know, and we can do that. That's totally fine.
Sure. Well, if it's cool with you still, I'm just going to wait for the editor to send back the book, and because what I think I'll do is I'll certainly make the book a part of the course, so people will get a copy for if they sign up. So I'd like to have that preferably in place.
No problem. You just let me know when you're ready, and we'll set it up. But again, Aaron, thank you so much for doing this. I really enjoy our conversations. I feel like I could have you on many times, and we could probably always come up with a different angle. So thanks, Aaron. And one more time, the website was playitloudmusic.com, right?
That's correct.
Okay, playitloudmusic.com for more information on Aaron Bethune and his company. You know my website, so I won't mention that again. But thanks, Aaron. Have a great day.
Sure. Actually, you know what? Abovethenoise.ca. That's the other one. I forgot.
Abovethenoise.ca. .ca. Okay, for Canada.
That's right.
Okay, abovethenoise.ca.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Aaron, and I'm sure we'll be speaking soon.
Thanks, Aaron. Have a great day.
Okay, man. You too.